It takes a lot of psychic energy to disavow what you're experiencing, to say, no, 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 it's not happening, or to deny it completely, or to think that we must have done something wrong. When we can let ourselves see that there are social conditions that are really oppressive, and we come together with other people who share our values, we feel energized and we feel strong. And that's really a benefit.
Hello, and welcome to Not Born Yesterday, a podcast dedicated to older adults and the challenges and joys of aging. I'm Miriam Goodman. Not Born Yesterday examines the problems and solutions of growing older today. We bring you the wisdom and voices of experts in the field of aging and offer tips on how to feel your best, use your lifetime skills and experience, and make the coming months and years as fulfilling as possible.
I'm Lynn Winter Gross. Not Born Yesterday is brought to you by Next Village San Francisco, a local nonprofit providing older adults with support to help age in place.
Today on Not Born Yesterday, we're discussing how political conflict influences our mental health. It turns out that there are emotional and psychological effects of political division, especially among older adults who often feel powerless and helpless. Even though most of us have lived through decades of political change, today's divisions seem deeper and meaner. Therapists tell us that patients feel their mental health and relationships are affected. Our guest today is Dr. Nancy Hollander, a Latin American historian and research psychoanalyst. She researched the ongoing trauma of extreme political repression and met with the grandmothers and therapists in Argentina who protested against the disappearance of their children and grandchildren during the military coup in the 1970s and 80s. She's also the author of Uprooted Minds, a social psychoanalysis for precarious times.
Dr. Hollander knows how struggle for power impacts us all, and we look forward to learning how those of us are affected by today's divisive times, how we might find solutions. Spoiler alert, she believes older adults must stay involved. Dr. Hollander, welcome to Not Born Yesterday. What happens to people emotionally when the country they live in feels so divided? Anxiety, depression, anger?
All of those things, of course. I think it's very decentering and disconcerting to find ourselves in a country that seems to betray all the foundational principles that we've taken for granted for years. And I think that people need to believe in the positive attributes of whatever culture, society they live in until the reality forces itself upon us and we either see what we see, allow ourselves to interpret the signs that our lives are really compromised and our rights assaulted, or we use unconscious psychological defenses to protect ourselves from knowing what we know, because otherwise we feel overwhelmed.
Dr. Hollander, can you tell us about what you learned from the protests in Argentina with the grandmothers and how that applies to where we are today?
What I learned by meeting and working with the grandmothers there in Argentina, especially, and the psychologists that worked alongside them, is that they were the first human rights organization to confront the authoritarian state. And they did so around their disappeared grandchildren. They were a sector of the mothers of the Plaza de Mayo who focused on looking for their disappeared kids. And the grandmothers were organized around demanding that the state, which argued that it had nothing to do with the disappearance of people, the grandmothers argued, you are the responsible ones and you need to give them back to us. By experiencing their sense of agency, even when they could have been really targeted, and several of them were, they created a sense of community that went beyond their individual lives and their those who were married, their couples, to create a new sense of identity in a group that was part and participating in the historical process that had damaged them and traumatized them and created horrible losses for them. They fared much better than the people their age, the women their age, who had lost grandchildren but were scared to come out and to be politically active and stayed at home, frightened and intimidated, isolated. What's wonderful about that situation is that there was an epidemiological study done years after the end of the dictatorship. And what it found was that the women who were active in both the mothers and the grandmothers organizations fared much better than their cohort, their age cohort that had done nothing, that had been really passive and isolated and just accepted because they were so frightened and intimidated. They fared better psychologically, and they suffered fewer physical ailments, and they had longer life expectancy than the larger age cohort. So there's actually information from the health system that shows us that being active and following your own principles and your beliefs gives you a sense of positive identification and agency that is really healthy for us.
So, do they have specific coping strategies that maybe we could borrow and use here for our own mental health?
It takes a lot of psychic energy to disavow what you're experiencing, to say, no, 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 it's not happening, or to deny it completely, um, or to think that we must have done something wrong. So I think when we can let ourselves see that there are social conditions that are really oppressive, and we come together with other people who share our values, we feel energized and we feel strong. And that's really a benefit. We feel like we're being consistent with who we believe we are, the values that we've always held, and that we continue to value and to recognize as completely opposite from what's happening in the larger political structure. So I think that it's actually easier for us to live with ourselves. I hear people who are progressive saying, I just can't stand, this is just overwhelming. I can't stand it. I'm not reading the news anymore. I'm just not, I can't take it. There's nothing I can do. Those people experience a kind of helplessness. And when one does that, one also has to struggle, even if you're not conscious of it, with the disparity between your values and what you believe in and how you're acting and what you're doing. And that often creates guilt and censorship of oneself.
We've done a number of podcast episodes with grandmother organizations, 1,000 Grandmas and the Raging Grandmas. And I was in the No Kings March wearing my grandma's t-shirt. And so many younger people came by and said thank you and took pictures of us. That if you're involved here, it really gives us strength too.
Yes, and I'm a member of 1,000 Grandmothers for Future Generations, and I was there with with our banners and all of that as well. And yes, I think when younger people see that there's the older generation who recognizes not only the dangers of the climate crisis, but the dangers of fascism, they feel protected. They feel safe. There's the adult generation, or several generations, since we're talking about grandparents, that are taking care of them, that are trying to take care of them. And that can only be a gift, a precious gift to younger people, because otherwise they've been abandoned by the adult population. Look at the world we're leaving them. So when the grandmothers um, accompany the youth that are involved politically, we know that we're transmitting to them a sense that there is continuity across generations of positive values, of a belief in the importance of fighting for life, of showing love for each other. Those are all positive attributes.
We have had guests on the podcast who are fighting for specific change, like environment or social justice issues, but now people around the world seem divided on what you can do about democratic institutions that are threatened, like free speech. So many people feel threatened by the protests. Like you said, they want to stay in the house, but how can they overcome that sense of paralysis?
Well, it's a big challenge. We all have to acknowledge that. People use all kinds of rationale that are accompanied by unconscious defenses of denial and that anything can be done. And it's just easier to accept what is. Well, I don't have a voice anymore. And if I use it, yeah, I'm going to get creamed because the repressive apparatus of the government, it's what we're calling anticipatory self-censorship. It's what the repressive authorities want us to internalize, because then they don't need we don't need a cop behind each one of us. So I think that is one inevitable byproduct of the growth of authoritarianism. But there are movements in every country that is undergoing this political threat that represent challenges.
So, what is the role of therapists and mental health professionals in these times when people of all social classes, I assume, are seeking help?
That's a very big issue now in the profession, because traditionally, and this is still believed by the majority of therapists, I think, traditionally our job is to listen to people, to see and frame their struggles within their own contexts, um, to be as quote unquote neutral as possible. And that includes we as mental health professionals. So, from my perspective, the job of a mental health professional is to understand as much as possible how we function to reproduce the dominant ideological frame, and how we can help our patients challenge their assumptions about what's okay to feel and what's okay to do. So I think many health mental health professionals are talking now about how the political actually is personal, what the feminist movement said decades ago, because patients are talking a lot about what's going on in the political world and their feelings about it. And I think the best we can do is to help our patients develop their own capacities to question their assumptions about what's causing the divisions and the increasing scary and angry sentiments on everybody's side. Um, I think it is a mistake to only help patients develop ways of calming themselves down and helping themselves, in spite of the socially traumatizing environment, feel better. Because from my perspective, that artificially separates the political from the personal.
We said at the beginning that you suggest that people stay involved. Can someone feel better in these times if they're doing something active that is not necessarily political, if they decide to volunteer at a school or at a pet shelter or anything like that? Do you find that is at all settling for these people?
Yes, I think that those gestures, those behaviors that have people concerned about other living things and making the effort to care for other living things is an important step. It might be the first step.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your suggestions on how we can stay involved and sane in these precarious times. Our guest was Dr. Nancy Hollander, therapist and author of Uprooted Minds. Today on News You Can Use, we're talking about a prejudice that you may not be aware of, but definitely affects us: ageism. Even our guest, Dr. Hollander, spoke about the effect of it on our own self-image. According to the American Society of Aging, too many people today are getting older with fear, denial, and even hostility. Ageist views affect how we think, how we feel, and how we act towards others. It can stop us from trying new things if we keep thinking, oh, I'm just too old. We often internalize the negative stereotypes ourselves without even being aware of it.
Ageism is found at work, in our healthcare systems, in advertisements, and in the media. It's one of the most widely accepted forms of prejudice and impacts us at all ages. So, what's the harm of this negative stereotype? A recent poll found that 82% of adults over 50 experience ageism daily, leading to chronic health conditions and depression.
Doctors often misdiagnose or assume a symptom is linked to old age rather than a medical condition that could be treated. With undertreatment, a patient may end up with more expensive, time-consuming emergency room visits and hospitalizations. Our public perception of older adults is affected by what we see in the media and in advertisements, where many older adults are underrepresented or portrayed negatively. It leads to younger people dismissing or ignoring older people's ideas and experience.
Ageism affects people in the workplace by denying older adults the opportunities for advancement, often pushing them into early retirement. So, what can we do to counteract the negative effects of ageism? Think of aging as a time of opportunity, growth, and optimism. Challenge your biases and assumptions on aging. Research shows that positive attitude toward aging can increase your lifespan by more than 7 years. And try to find opportunities for intergenerational contact. Working with people of younger generations will not only help change their attitudes and dispel their negative myths, but can help you find new meaning and energy. And that's our podcast for today. Our thanks go to our guest, Dr. Nancy Hollander. You can learn more about Next Village San Francisco at their website, nextvillagesf.org, or by calling them at 415-888-2868. Our theme music is from Hook Sounds, and Jason Dahlstedt is our engineer. And we thank you for listening. We'd love to hear what you would like us to discover and discuss. Please contact us at notbornyesterdaypodcast.org. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. All of these are free and let us know our audience better. Be well, stay strong, and remember, you weren't born yesterday. I'm Lynn Winter Gross.
And I'm Miriam Goodman.